Mm. We're going to have to, apparently, someone wants to have a little bit of political debate about, Bernie Sanders, Bernie Sanders is a guy from the United States who is an old man, and apparently he's not from the Democrats or the Republicans party, but he's a senator of some kind, so he's a politician. And he's got a friend named AOC. So if you see these videos, they say AOC and Sanders. AOC apparently is the initials of a lady who travels with him and speaks at rallies. Okay, and apparently she's from the Democrats party. Anyway, there was a video seen the other day of Bernie Sanders, and he was saying that there was a whole bunch of rulings, including overturning Roe versus Wade, that the Supreme Court did that they don't support, and they think it's really lousy. However, because they believe in rule of law, that means that the Supreme Court rulings still have to be followed, and that means Donald Trump has to do that as well, and that means he has to follow the Supreme Court ruling of 9-0. So 9-0 means all 9 of the Supreme Court judges or something agreed about something. And it seems that the topic that they were talking about was whether or not the people they were sending to El Salvador should just go there, or they should see a lawyer and go to court first. And apparently the Supreme Court thought that they should see a lawyer and go to court first, because the Constitution said so or something. So, okay, fair enough. On a matter of moral principle, that sounds kind of fair. If you believe that the court system is the best means by which a matter is decided, then okay then. That's the way it ought to happen. So, with the American system, if you're in Australia, you might know that the Supreme Court refers to the state court. So the Supreme Court of New South Wales, and that the High is a bigger court and has more power than the local or the district court, and local district courts probably have a different type of power to a tribunal. So in the Australian system, it's a little bit like this. Okay, there's tribunals that oversee civil matters that are unable to make precedents and don't have magistrates. They have tribunal members, and the tribunal members are roughly the equivalent of volunteers from the judge and magistrate community who come in and just oversee a particular matter and make a decision. And it's on a case-by-case basis based on a statute that the tribunal covers. So each tribunal covers a particular statute. For example, the Residential Tenancies Tribunal covers the Residential Tenancies Act. And it's independent from the Supreme Court, the local and the district court, and each oversee different matters. Okay. The Supreme Court covers the jurisdiction known as the state. So the state of New South Wales is a geographical area within the Federation or Commonwealth known as Australia. Australia is probably best described as a federation at this point for other reasons. We won't say why right now because it's not relevant. The point to this particular conversation anyway, it's very relevant to a larger conversation, but for the purposes of this conversation, it's not relevant. Okay, so Australia, the Federation, is made up of 7 states, or more specifically, 5 states and 2 territories. And the 5 states and 2 territories the 5 states have Supreme Courts, and the High Court is in Canberra, which is part of a territory called the Australian Capital Territory, and the Australian Capital, each territory has its own parliament. However, with the territories, their parliamentary laws can be overturned by the federal parliament should the federal parliament see fit. An example of that was the voluntary euthanasia laws passed by the Northern Territory. This is an issue, and gay marriage laws. So there was some issue with one of the territories. It could have been Northern Territory or even the ACT, and might have even been the ACT of all places. Actually, let's deal with that one. The Australian, as an example, the Australian Capital Territory has its own parliament, in addition to the federal parliament that Canberra's more famous for, and to oversee territorial matters. And they decide in the territory that they want gay marriage to be legal. Okay, so within the ACT, which incidentally includes the federal capital Canberra, okay, that greater region, they decided to make gay marriage legal at the territory level, which meant outside of that, which is known as the state of New South Wales technically, because the ACT is a small area within the state of New South Wales. Okay, New South Wales, it wasn't legal at that time, but in the ACT it were. And the federal government, Canberra, the federal parliament in Canberra, which is geographically located inside the ACT, but is considered a federal jurisdiction rather than a territorial or state jurisdiction, okay, decided to overrule that and say at that point the gay marriage wasn't legal. Okay, so there was a bit of a debate that went on about that. Eventually, they did a plebiscite across the entire continent. So all the states and territories did a plebiscite, which is just that was like, just some kind of political engineering thing. So don't worry about it too much. The point is that in the case of a territory like the ACT or the Australian Capital Territory, there are actually two jurisdictions there. One is the Australian Capital Territory and the other is Canberra, also known as the Federal Capital. So it's a rather complicated place all on its own. There are actually two parliaments there, or two parliament houses there, that are in current operation. The territorial one, which is overruled by the federal one, if the federal one sees fit, and likewise the federal one has been known to overrule decisions made by the Northern Territory as well, but does not have the power to overrule the statutes made by the states such as New South Wales, Victoria, etc., etc. The High Court in Canberra is independent from the district and local courts of the ACT. The High Court in Canberra oversees the Constitution, or the Federal Constitution, which is associated with the Federal Parliament. Okay? Are you getting lost yet? Of course you are. You're meant to. Okay? It's a system. A system's meant to have lots of different places to go. It's supposed to organise things, but it also confuses you. Okay? And that's what, when you get the language differences and stuff, like language is a big thing here, because Supreme Court in the United States of America means High Court. Okay, so if you did a translation into Australian English, okay, that means High Court. So their Supreme Court in the USA doesn't deal with the state matters. It deals with the federal matters. It deals with their constitution. Okay, it deals with the one that decides who the president is, and who the president's supposed to be the boss of. Or shall we say, not the boss of, ruled by. Okay, so there seems to be a big thing in the United States of America where the president is ruled by the Constitution. Okay, that's his boss. Okay, and their Supreme Court, which is very, very different from Supreme Court language in Australia, okay, is ruled by the US Constitution. So the US Supreme Court is ruled by the US Federal Constitution. Okay, that's the decisions they make. Is it constitutional or not? What does the Constitution say? Okay, and the president is supposed to follow the Constitution. So he's supposed to be commander-in-chief of the military and a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, but he's supposed to be ruled by the Constitution. The Constitution is his boss, and the Supreme Court says the Constitution says jump, he has to say how high. And then the Supreme Court can reply back and say this high, and then he has to do it. If he doesn't do it, it's called a constitutional crisis, and everyone goes, and panics. And he's done that, apparently. So they're pretty worried over there at the moment. So what Bernie Sanders was basically saying was that, well, does he really want a country that's done by rule of law or not? Because rule of law in that case means their highest court in their land said that their highest legal document in their land had a particular decision that could be made by it, and he wasn't following it. He was breaking the law. No offence, it's not that surprising. He's got 34 fraud convictions. He's not exactly known for honesty at this point. And why isn't he in prison? Because the New York State Court didn't follow the rule of law. Okay? They have mandatory sentencing in the New York State Court for people who've committed fraud. There are news articles about that from the USA to show that. In the New York State system, fraud carries with it a mandatory sentencing conviction. The conviction carries mandatory sentencing, in other words, custodial sentence. He either go to prison or he does house arrest. Either way, he's got a mandatory custodial sentence. Okay, he wear ankle fucking bracelet. He has to report to. He gets 24-hour watch by a prison guard, even if he's not actually in the literal can. Okay, that's how it's supposed to be, and he's not allowed to vote. But no, those things happen. He get convicted to become president. Okay, New York State court system did not follow New York State law. And this is all why, well, Donald Trump was saying that the states have to be the states in the USA have to be respected, and their independence and their sovereignty has to be respected. But his mere position as president right now is disrespect of New York State law. So ever since he got his fraud conviction, they've been in a constitutional crisis the entire time. It started the moment he got his fraud conviction and he didn't go to prison in the first place. which he should have done. That's when the constitutional crisis began. Not recently with this immigrant stuff, but last year with the fraud conviction. Like, and how can someone who's not even a lawyer in Australia see that? Like, this is what he's not a lawyer, let alone a constitutional lawyer from the USA. But it's plain as fucking day that they haven't been following rule of law since he got caught, since his fraud conviction. So say Donald Trump broke the rule of law? No, the New York State Court did. Chew on that one.